Welcome to Fit Strong Women Over 50, episode 57. Welcome to the Becoming Ellie Community Podcast. I'm Jill.
And I'm Chris. We named the community for our podcast Becoming Ellie because Ellie is the Norse goddess of aging. And when she was challenged to a wrestling match with Thor, she surprised everyone by winning.
Yeah. So we decided we wanted to be fit and strong as we age, like Ellie. And while we all want to be fit and strong, we are still working on becoming fit and strong.
Yeah, getting fit and strong is always a challenge for me. I feel like today's guest is a good person for us to talk with for any number of reasons. She has helped me to improve my immunity and health, so it seems fitting to bring her to the podcast today to share her insights.
Yes, we covered a lot in this episode, so let's get started. Our guest today is Dr. Victoria Shaw. She has an extensive educational background. Dr. Shaw received her Doctorate of Nursing Practice from Case Western Reserve University, her Master of Science in Nursing from University of Wisconsin-Madison, and her Bachelor of Arts from Pennsylvania State University.
She also has additional credentials and certifications from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, Cornell University, Princeton Biofeedback Center, and the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, among others.
She is a nurse practitioner, health and wellness coach, and a facilitator of compassionate change.
Dr. Shaw combines cutting-edge, evidence-based science with time-honored wisdom to help her clients feel better, sleep better, and relieve bothersome symptoms.
Please join us in welcoming Dr. Victoria Shaw.
We're so glad that you can join us today.
Hi, I'm really glad that I could join you too. Thanks for the invitation.
You know, there's so many ways that we could take today's discussion. And because we're in the middle of a pandemic while we're recording this, I think it might be most appropriate to start out with a question about the immune system. We talk about our body's immune system, but what is it? What exactly is the immune system, physically speaking?
So our immune system is a pretty complex system that is always surveying the landscape and trying to keep us safe. So from the time that we're born, we are exposed to environmental factors that get our bodies prepared to live on this planet. So we develop antibodies, and those are immune cells that are evidence of having been exposed to something. So, in the news now, we're hearing about antibody testing for the coronavirus, and that is evidence that we've been exposed to something. So, throughout our lifetimes, we are exposed to all kinds of things, whether they are viruses, bacteria, fungus, even food sensitivities. We can develop antibodies against things that our immune system is kind of working on our behalf to protect us from. When they perceive a threat, they're creating these complexes to protect us.
Interesting. So what are common things that we can do to improve our immune system?
Oh, that is a great question, Jill. So one of the best things that we can do to fortify our immune systems is really the things that are good for our general overall health. So those are going to be things like getting enough sleep. If there were one thing that I could, have people do to have a good, strong immune system, it would probably be that, because sleep is also so important for everything else. And I think that we often short shrift sleep because there are just so many other interesting things that we get involved in, right? And there's so many things that we want to do. We have multiple roles and multiple interests. And, I often talk to women who say, oh, I wish I had, 9 lives because, this one career or whatever I do isn't just enough because there's all these other fascinating things. So I think that it's very challenging for us to actually wind down at the end of the day and get to bed at a decent hour consistently. And then to have the mind and body be in a state of restful, receptive repose so that sleep can actually come to us naturally. And so that's a big thing for the immune system is sleep. And in fact, in my years of clinical practice, I would say that of all the things that I have heard women have the most difficulty with, sleep is way, way high up there on the list with maybe a handful of other things, but sleep is a big issue. So other things that are great for the immune system are eating a really healthy, nutrient-dense diet and avoiding the things that, we all kind of know it's better to avoid. I spoke to my cousin the other day on the phone, and he said, well, I just got back from my mom's and I brought her a box of donuts. And I'm like, Bob, you don't need to be bringing your mom donuts. What's that? I mean, so we kind of know those sorts of things. Fast food, junk food, processed food, heavily dyed and chemically treated food, all of that stuff. Your immune system actually has to work against all of those kind of onslaughts of damage. So the other side of that coin is that things that are healthy, whole, real foods that you find in nature, foods that our grandmothers would understand, not all these highly colorful and fake frankenfoods, those are terrible for your immune system. All the colors of the rainbow, foods that are wild caught, pasture raised, grown organically, all of those things are going to give you all sorts of nutrients and molecules really that help to build up your immune system. So it's kind of like the double win. So you're getting all of these healthy, wholesome things that are actually contributing to positive immunity, and you're also not taxing your immune system with having to put it fighting in a battle against things that are completely unnecessary. So food is a really big contributor to immune strength. And then probably the other big, huge factor for immune well-being is the system that protects us from stress. So, we could do this entire podcast on stress. That's actually something that I've kind of specialized in over the years. I'm a long time appreciator of methods to reduce stress. And one of the things that has been most formative in my professional life and also in my personal life was studying mindfulness-based stress reduction about, probably 15 years ago now. And in that study, I really learned just how devastating stress is on every body system, but including the immune system.
That kind of gets to my question, which is, along with getting sleep and eating right, avoiding stress, what should we not be doing? I mean, what really wreaks havoc on the immune system?
Right.
You started to go there about the stress, for sure.
Right. So, it's almost impossible to avoid stress. All you need to do is basically get up in the morning, and if you turn on your computer and access any media that lives inside your computer, or turn the radio on or turn the television on, you're going to be exposed to stress. I think it's interesting the way that humans evolved. We we came from small bands of tribal members, maybe 30, maybe 50 people in a little tribal band. And it's possible to kind of handle all of the troubles that 30 or 50 people might have.
Yeah.
But not the entire global village. And so I think that with the rise of all of the ways that, are wonderful that we have for connecting with each other and knowing about what's going on in the world, it also comes at a pretty high price. So knowing about all the trouble is a huge source of stress. So as you mentioned, in this pandemic, my goodness, the media and the evolving knowledge base that's happening with this thing, it's amazing. And you literally could spend all day, every day, just tuning in to what the newest models are saying, what the newest statistics are showing, all of the human interest stories that are both tragic and heartwarming. You could literally do that all day, every day. And so, you ask, what should we not be doing? I think we should not be doing that all day, every day.
Yeah.
It's good. It's
Don't
good to
obsess.
be
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
It's good to be informed. You want to know what's happening, but then have balance. You have to have balance. And so, really limiting, especially the negative media, of which there is quite a bit, really limiting that. And also limiting exposure to, and this is just kind of a general thing, not related to this pandemic, but just in general, people and circumstances that are not uplifting, but that are down dragging and that cause your soulful self to feel bad in some way. I know a lot of people, like in the therapy world, will talk about toxic relationships.
Yeah.
Right? So, and we know who those people are. It's not hard to find them. So just kind of protecting ourselves in that way, I think is also really important.
Yeah, good.
I've made the observation that my brother does not do social media. So that when he wants to find someone, he asks me to, basically find them on Facebook, which is fine. But what I do notice is he does not, seem to be as aware of certain things of what, like that people are upset about. But it goes both ways. He is sort of not aware of some of the things going on in the world, but he's also a lot less worried about what's going on in the world.
Absolutely. I used to, years ago, write prescriptions when we actually had prescription pads on paper.
Right.
I would take a prescription and write a prescription for somebody and just write news fast on there. And I got that idea from Andrew Weil, who you might know is kind of thought of as the father of integrative medicine.
Oh, yeah. I love him.
I love Andrew Weil, too. He's kind of one of my, sort of professional, distant kind of grandfather mentors. So I got that idea from him. That was at least 25 years ago. And I can't imagine how much more important that is now, because my goodness, all that time ago, we certainly were not as immersed in this intense media saturation that we are today.
Right. I had those cassette tapes called 8 Weeks to Optimum Health.
Right.
And I listened to them in my
those.
car. And so that's dating me and my car. It's been a while. But I think it was the first or second week he talked about something like a news fast, where you don't read the newspaper, you don't listen to the radio. And of course, the internet wasn't a thing at that point.
Exactly.
But it really would. And I thought, this is kind of silly. And how can I do that? I was brought up as a journalist, and that's how I frame I'm just all about news. And I did find that it was a huge change now that I think about it, but it was 8 weeks to optimum health. And it was like the second week you had to go on a news fast for a whole week. Don't listen to the news. And I thought, that's crazy.
Did you do it?
Oh, I did it. Because I had the cassette tapes. I did it. It was very good.
Chris is very rule compliant.
Yes, I am. I try to be, when I want to do something, that it's just so funny to think back to that.
Right.
Because it has to be, like you said, about 20 years ago.
At least.
Or maybe more, because it was cassette tapes. And,
Yep.
Anyway.
And
it's so funny you would say that. That would be a really good thing for me to avoid, at least for a day. I don't know if I could even go a day right now without news.
Well, that's the thing. And, again, before this pandemic, I love the idea of the digital detox. We could, in fact, Jill, going back to your question about, what can you do for the immune system? And one of the things is actually detoxifying. But there's this whole other aspect of detoxification that's actually got to do with digital detoxification. So, not just the news, but actually just all of our devices. And we are so addicted to these things. And, it's kind of a two-way street because we love our technology. I mean, without it, we wouldn't be having this three-way conversation right now.
Right.
So, of course, we love it. But there's also, again, it's back to this idea of balance. So I think that it's wonderful if we can, for a period of time every day, to put the phones and the screens and the tablets and the laptops away. And this also gets back to the point about sleep. So good sleep hygiene is something that everybody in, functional medicine and natural medicine and circadian rhythm medicine talk about. The body and mind need to have time at the end of the day to allow the natural production of melatonin to begin. And if you're looking at your screens and you're getting blue light in through your eyes, it's stimulating to the brain. Your brain thinks that it's daytime. So you can't make good melatonin with all that blue light coming in. And where does the blue light come from? It only comes from it comes primarily from the screens that we're using. So that's a main sort of strategy that people should really be thinking about in order to get good sleep, but also just to give us a break from all of that kind of activity. Because as we have become more dependent on and involved in screen life, I think that other things have really taken a back seat, things that are important and meaningful and very sort of soul enriching and nourishing. And things like even just, reading a novel or writing in a journal or writing a letter or doing practices. I do and love yoga and other kinds of mind-body practices. So the evening before sleep is a great time to do those things and to turn the screens off, get away from the news and get away from all of the other stuff that's in there. That's another thing that I think is a double win. And I'm a big fan of these things that are double wins. So you're avoiding the news, you're getting a little bit of a news fast if you're turning off your screens at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, but you're also having time to actually have some of that downtime and sort of ramping down time that you really need to go into deep sleep.
That's good.
Yeah.
I wrote a letter to my parents are in assisted living, basically, and no one can get in to see them.
Right.
And so I wrote a letter to them and mailed it, and I thought, my goodness, I haven't written a letter on paper with a pen in so long. I've forgotten how to do it.
So how was that? I'm just curious. Did you enjoy that?
Well, it made me realize that there's absolutely no reason that I shouldn't be writing to them much more often, given the situation. And it was fine. It was good. Back many years ago, I used to have you get calluses on your fingers and your fingers are stronger from using a pen all the time. And I don't have that now. Not like I used to when I was in school and, could write for hours by hand.
Interesting.
But that's gone.
Do you ever get finger cramps trying to take notes about something? I've noticed that because I don't use a pen or a pencil like I used to.
Right.
I do know that the muscles are not as strong as they used to be in my hands.
Right. So what I was going to say about that is, the hands and the brain. The brain has so much real estate in it devoted to the fingers and hands.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that.
Yes, absolutely. Have you ever seen those little drawings of the homunculus where it's actually a representation, sort of symbolic map of the different regions of the brain and how they are associated with different body parts?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So on that drawing, the thumb is huge.
Oh.
Because this opposable thumb that we evolved with enabled us to, apprehend our world, make tools, and do all of the things that allowed us to, gain this tremendous ascendancy on the planet. And so a lot of the things that we used to do by hand, so things like sewing and digging in a garden and making things and fixing things, all of those kinds of things that we now might consider almost as lost arts. Those things are very, very nourishing and wonderful for the brain. They make us feel good. They give us a sense of agency and control over our environment. And I think that a lot of people who struggle with mood issues, one of the best things I think that they can do is actually do things with their hands. So whether it's like writing a letter or making a garden or, something like that, something physical, doing embroidery even. I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but we're made to use our hands.
It makes me think of playing a musical instrument because I know I have that feeling when I play music. I'm reading the music with my mind, but my fingers are moving. There's so many parts that have to move. It's definitely evokes different feelings inside.
Right. What instrument do you play, Chris?
Well, I have a saxophone.
How cool.
Yeah, I've had it for a very long time. I'm not very good, but I'm good enough to play. I know the notes.
That's
but
fun,
I don't like to play in front of other people,
Well, but making music, that music is another whole thing. I mean, the brain is just arranged in really just amazing ways. And music has a particular kind of benefit to the brain and body. And, too, when we say brain, you can't separate that from the body, obviously. But I think we tend to think of it a little bit like that. Like we have the brain up here and then the body down here. And it's all one.
Yeah. Well, I think of the brain in your head and then the second and third brain, like your stomach and your gut.
Right.
Different brains. I don't know. I've heard of that. I don't know.
Absolutely. No,
I don't know much about it, but.
Yeah, the enteric nervous system is like a second brain. It's your belly brain. And also we have a heart brain.
Heart brain. Okay.
Yes. So there's a whole branch of medicine called Neuro Cardiology. This is just kind of recently being understood that the brain and the heart are in constant connection and communication, just like the brain and the gut are. And so when we feel certain kinds of things, like you might say you feel like butterflies in your stomach, well, that's because your brain and your gut are definitely, talking to each other. But when you think about the heart and the brain connection, one of a really nice practice for mind-body medicine is called heart math. And it's a science that's it's probably been around for maybe 25 years. It's a highly researched kind of technology that both uses it actually does use technology like an app that you use on your phone to look at the coherence or heart rate variability of your heart. But also you can just access that same kind of sense of coherence, which is when your brain and your heart are kind of on the same page. If you just let yourself imagine that you're breathing into your heart area. Mm-hmm. And so we can just do that right now, just kind of dropping that sense of awareness of the breath down into the space of the heart. And if you do that while you are also holding in mind some kind of a memory, an experience of being in a moment in your life that was especially beautiful and wonderful, where you felt happy and safe and delighted. Maybe it would be a parent with a child, or with a pet, or looking at a beautiful sunset, or up into the night sky filled with stars. We have this sense of wonder or joy or peace or awe, and you hold that sort of experiential image in your body mind while you are breathing into the heart space, and that creates this wonderful phenomenon called coherence between the heart and the brain. And that's a really nice, a very easy way actually to access a kind of sense of calm and peace. And boy, if we ever needed that, we need that now, right?
Absolutely.
So heart math is what you just described, but is this something that you go out and get if there's an app on your phone, or?
Yes, it's actually both. So HeartMath is a company that produces some technology that you actually can go buy a little sensor for your iPhone or Android. You just plug it in, download the app, and you attach, there's a little sensor that you put on your earlobe or finger, and it actually measures your heart rate variability, and you practice it by looking at the app. It has a little circular mandala that looks like flower petals that open and close with your breath. And so that's the technology side of it. But the exercises, like the little meditations, those are just things that you don't need the app for. You just kind of learn how to do those on your own. They're basically just a little breathing exercise that you use other parts of your body mind as well at the same time.
Okay, that's interesting.
I think my Fitbit has a little app like that for the relaxing, and you breathe in and out, and it has sort of circles that go in and out for you to relax. And then it can tell if you're matching what you're supposed to be doing. So
right.
I have that, I think, on my Fitbit, and I have to say I've never looked at it.
Well, there you go. You might just play with that a little. Yeah, I'm a big fan of all kinds of ways to have the body and mind be syncing together, because, our thoughts can just take us so far afield and get us really worked up. I mean, most of the time we're actually thinking about something in the past or something in the future. And neither of those time zones is actually reality. This moment that we're in right now is the only moment there really is, but yet the mind and the thoughts take us into this kind of chronic state of rehearsing or rehashing. And that causes so much stress and strife and anxiety and regret and all kinds of things. But when you can really just learn how to be present in this moment, that really has, I think, the greatest chance of allowing us to be calm and quieted and comforted. And really, if you ask yourself almost any time, how are you right now? You'll usually find that the answer is, well, right now I'm okay. But if you start thinking about, well, how about what's going to happen when, and if I only wouldn't have said that or done that, or what if, and all of that stuff, that's when we really get into some trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, doesn't that make sense? And, again, looking back at my clinical practice over the years, I don't know how many times out of 100, I want to say maybe 90 times out of 100, when I would ask people about, what is it that troubles you? Very, very often it's, I can't stop my racing mind, or I can't sleep because I can't stop thinking, or I worry, I'm anxious. Well, worry and anxiety are actually just about that. It's really just about going out, projecting the mind out into a future that has not occurred. And
there's like a poem about, the past is history, the future is a mystery. All we have is today, and that's a gift, and that's why it's called the present. Of course,
I love that.
But there's some little rhymey thing that is really.
I think that's
that
perfect.
Last line I messed up, but it is that today is a gift, and that's why we call it the present. It's so hard to stay in the present because I'm either anticipating or, expectations, or I'm like, oh, geez, why did I, regret. Or,
absolutely. And that's why, and that's really why I think we need practices in order to train that, because these are skills that are highly cultivatable. But without a practice, without like a specific way to do that, because people ask me this all the time. Well, how do you do that? How do you let go of worry?
Right.
Well, you sit still, you take a breath, you feel your body, you ground yourself, you feel the contact points of where you're sitting, you feel the breath coming in and going out, and you just let go of everything else. And the second that you get a thought, which will probably be in about a second, you just let it go. And then you come right back to that feeling of the breath, or the feeling of the feet on the floor. Or if you're looking out at the sky, at the beautiful blue sky, it's kind of like that. That's a really good analogy, actually. You have this ability of the being nature to just be, and awareness and being are like the beautiful blue sky. They're always there. But then the thoughts are just scurrying across that beautiful blue sky all day, every day. And it can get pretty cloudy. And we can forget that beautiful, clear, luminous blue sky is there when it's pretty cloudy. But when you learn how to do a practice like a mindfulness practice, or something where you're actually training the mind and body to just be present and let the thoughts go and become more in tune with and identify with that ever-present sense of clarity and openness, like the beautiful blue sky, it becomes something that isn't just like something you do as a practice. It becomes more like the way that you are. And then you can bring that way of being into every other area of your life. And really, when we're with another person or just with ourselves, we're trying to do a task or create something, we really have to be present in order to do those things well. And so these skills really teach us the skills of presencing, if that's a word. I don't think it's a word, but I like it. It sounds right. Yeah.
Well, that's sort of interesting. And we just talked a little bit ago about the other skills of doing things with our hands and things that we don't do anymore. I don't know. I had a connection there between what you were just saying and doing things with your hand. I mean, maybe it's a good way to be mindful, is to be out working in your garden.
Absolutely. But, even if you don't have a garden, so you both have been to my place. I have this little tiny balcony, which I'm actually thinking of turning into a partial gardening space this year. For the first time, I may do that. But even if you don't have a garden, like I work with vegetables a lot. I am like constantly processing vegetables. I make and eat a lot of salads and stir fries and soups and things like that. So one of the things that I am it's one of my most pleasing things that I do is work with kitchen things. I'm washing the vegetables.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's just being in the kitchen. So, interesting little side kind of note. In the Zen world, when people go on Zen retreats, everybody has a job. So in addition to just being on a silent retreat where you meditate a lot, everybody has a little job to do. So somebody is maybe gathering wood for the fire that's going to heat up the meditation room. Somebody else is bringing in the animals, if it's a farm kind of a thing. Somebody else has kitchen work to do. And the kitchen work in a little Zen retreat experience is considered to be like the best job that you can have. And the reason for that is, I think that working in the kitchen, working with food, what are you doing when you're working with food? Well, you're taking these beings, these living beings, a tomato, a cucumber, whatever else, a carrot. You're washing and cleaning and chopping. You're using knives. You have to pay attention. You're using flame. There's fire. So you have to be sharp. So paying attention and being in the body, you can hurt yourself if you're just chopping away and you're not paying attention and your finger gets in the way of the knife. Or if you happen to go to reach into the oven and you're not paying attention to how far away from the heating element your hand is. The attentiveness required by kitchen work is a wonderful learning environment for being mindful, being present in the body. So that's kind of one layer. But the other layer that I was also going to say is that one of the things that I do is I work with energy healing. Some people know Reiki or healing touch or therapeutic touch. All of these are modalities that are harnessing the fact of energy, the universal life force energy that flows through us all and through everything, and to kind of work with that energy. So one of the ways that I apply that is that when I'm preparing food, I am very much aware of the energy of the plants or animals that have gone into the food that I'm making. And that also lends itself to a wonderful, deep experience of gratitude. And I think that that's another way that we can really open our heart and mind to the present moment experience, is to really dial in on being grateful. And I know that it's become a very popular and almost now kind of overused thing. So everybody has a gratitude journal or does a gratitude practice. But I think that if you look at it in a little bit deeper way, every bite of food that we eat came from somewhere. It had to be grown, and the food itself makes an ultimate sacrifice for us. But also whoever picked the food, the processing that had to go, into getting it onto the trucks from the field and into a package. We just go to the grocery store and we pick up all this beautiful produce that's already there, ready for us. Or if it's, let's say you're having a dinner of salmon and vegetables, that salmon had to be fished, and a whole world of ice and dock workers and packaging and shipping and trucking had to be involved. And so all along the way, there are countless efforts that go into even something as simple as a meal that we eat, let alone everything else that we have in vast, huge abundance. We have electricity and hot and cold, climate-controlled environments. We don't have to sew all the clothes that we wear every day. We have sight and sound, and we have each other to connect with. And we take these things completely for granted. And I think that that's another way in which we get kind of separated from ourselves and from the deep connections that we have with each other. all of those things, I think, really contribute to a lot of the feelings that people have that are maybe less than happy. We feel disaffected or cut off,
disjointed. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that the more we do things like this, the more aware we are of how we're deeply connected with each other, using our hands, being present in the moment, being in the body. We get so up in our heads all the time that we just have this body as an afterthought sometime. Now, I know that for you gals and your listeners who are involved in, lots of physical activity, that's probably less true. So that's wonderful.
Well, that makes me think too, there's a lot of women that are over 50 in our group that are very hard driving, and they challenge themselves to overcome really big physical challenges. So when we talk about some of the self-care things like mindfulness and meditation, even yoga, it can be hard for some people, myself included, to slow down and really adapt and adopt these practices. And I'm wondering if you can kind of outline maybe a few of the benefits to adopting these self-care practices. I mean, if you could just enumerate them, it helps me to realize I need to do this.
Yeah. So, I think that self-care is actually something that's it's so general that it kind of depends on what category of self-care we're talking about. The benefits will be different. But for one thing, if we don't care for ourselves, no one will. No one can. No one else can care for ourselves the way that we can. Whether that means going for a walk, doing a yoga practice, making healthy food, connecting with each other, making a garden, all of those things, they make our lives rich and good. They're the basic, they're the very things that if we don't do them, well, we don't have them in our life. So then what do we have?
Yeah.
So self-care, it's like a basic nutrient for well-being. And without it, you just can't have all sorts of good things in your life. But as far as some of the kinds of things, though, that you're listing, like a yoga practice, like slowing down so that you can do something like yoga. Well, gosh, if you look at the literature, the benefits of yoga are just profound. In just every area of health and medicine, if you look, yoga is wonderful for your physical body, obviously, but also yoga is wonderful for sleep, for depression, for anxiety, for being able to cope with life. Like when you're doing a yoga pose, you're practicing something that's difficult, but you're practicing it when the circumstances aren't that difficult. So let's say you want to learn how to do a balance pose. You stand on your yoga mat, you go on one leg, you lift the other leg up, and you find this balance. Balance is actually an ongoing thing. You actually never reach balance, but you're always working toward it, right?
Yeah.
But then
I know in my practice that's true.
Well, no, it's just true. It's absolutely just true. There is no perfect balance. We're always like riding that wave. But then you learn that, and then something comes up in your life in a different place in your life, not on your yoga mat, but it comes up where you feel that, I've gotten out of balance here with this part of things. I've spent too much time doing these things and not enough time doing others. I need balance. Yeah. So that's kind of one way that yoga is good. It has a lot of transfer and translation into other areas of the life, but also, you have to actually work to make the muscles strong to stand on that one leg. So then when you're doing something else that you love, skiing or biking or whatever else, all those little tendons and muscles in your foot and ankle that have gotten a good workout are there for you. So there's just a lot of connection. And also yoga is yoga is a spiritual practice. We do it here in the West as exercise, but, the way that it was initially has come into being is as a way to prepare the body for meditation. And it's interesting, again, in the West, we have kind of taken this tradition from India and made it completely our own. And as it evolved in India, it was an exercise for young boys to actually kind of get all the restless energy out of them before they would be instructed in meditation so that they could sit still.
Oh.
And also so that
That's
the body would be, so the body would be flexible and strong to be able to withstand the rigors of meditation. Because if you've ever tried to sit and have a meditative experience, it is not easy. I mean, maybe for a minute, it's okay. But for long periods, you will come up against yourself. The yoga is a mind-body discipline. It's a spiritual practice. It's a physical health practice. So it has all of these kinds of benefits. But specifically, it's good for digestion. It's good for your blood pressure. It's good for your brain health. I mean, again, depending on what kind of self-care practice we're talking about, the benefits could be really variable.
Is there a difference between mindfulness and meditation?
Oh, that's a great question. So meditation is this huge umbrella of different kinds of disciplines and practices, and cultures all over the world for probably forever have been doing some kind of thing that you could call meditation, something where the mind and body are still and quiet, and there's a reflective openness. So mindfulness was actually historically the kind of meditation that the historical Buddha taught. And then about 40 years ago now, mindfulness became kind of a social phenomenon because of pretty much one man. Jon Kabat-Zinn was a molecular biologist, I believe, at MIT. And he also was a yoga teacher. He taught a yoga class at Harvard Square and began to think that the benefits that his yoga students were getting would be so wonderful if they could be applied in the medical context for medical patients. So he and some of his colleagues at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center put together a little pilot study to see how a program in specifically training attributes of mindfulness, which I think his definition is paying attention on purpose in a non-judgmental way. And that's really what mindfulness is. And you can do that with anything. You can cook mindfully. You can go for a walk mindfully. You can write a letter mindfully. You can pour a cup of tea mindfully or mindlessly, right? Yeah. So you can bring your attention, bring your awareness into the present moment and just be there for the thing that you're doing, but without judging it. And that's a big part of mindfulness because so many times whenever we do anything, we kind of have this little inner critic always chattering away. Oh, that wasn't very good. What did you mean by that? You shouldn't have said that. That was really stupid. What do you think? I mean, just like this constant barrage of, self-demeaning commentary. So when you're present mindfully, paying attention on purpose to any act that you're doing, but you're doing it without judging. You're just there, applying the bare attention. So how does this feel to hold the pen while I write on this paper? There's a lot of sensual pleasure and presence and gravity to just about any act that we're doing. But we mostly miss it, either because we're multitasking, our mind is somewhere else, or we're judging it. I don't like the way I made that letter, or that's a scratchy sound, or I should have chosen different paper, or whatever. So anyway, John Kabat-Zinn and his friends at UMass Medical Center put together a pilot study. They looked at this program that they eventually called mindfulness-based stress reduction. And if you look in the literature now, there are literally thousands of research articles in every discipline from dermatology to psychiatry on how mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR for short, has helped a specific kind of clinical problem. And so mindfulness in that way became this huge social phenomenon. Every academic medical center in the world just about has a program offering MBSR. And so it became kind of another way to say meditation practice, but yet there are many other kinds of meditation practices that are not mindfulness, like transcendental meditation, or TM, for instance, is another type of meditation. There are a lot of other examples.
Okay, thank you.
One of the things that you introduced me to was Yoga Nidra. Is that something you could describe for our listeners?
Sure. So Yoga Nidra it's actually a really interesting combination of some ancient elements and some modern elements. But Yoga Nidra is a process of, first, actually, let me just define the word Nidra. Is a Sanskrit word meaning sleep, but the practice, so that can sound kind of tricky, like what is yogic sleep, right? So It means an awareness across all states of consciousness. And so when you do the practice of Yoga Nidra, you're bringing the awareness faculty of consciousness into both wakefulness and a deep state of relaxation, and into a state that's very much like the hypnagogic state that you are in between wakefulness and sleep, and even beyond that. So there's a presence and awareness of the gross body, and then the subtle body, and then the very subtle body. And you're kind of traveling deeper into that subtle dimension, but with awareness. And then you're coming out of the subtle, back to the gross, back to the physical body, back to this here and now world. And the process of doing that has been likened to moving through the different stages of sleep. So your brain goes through different brainwave stages at different sleep stages. And that same thing happens in Yoga Nidra. So talking about benefits, Yoga Nidra is believed to have the same kinds of benefits in a very short period of time that you get in a full night of sleep. So something like a half-hour Yoga Nidra session takes you through those different sleep stages and gives us some of the benefits of sleeping for a whole night. But it's also, in a deeper way, a lot of the traditions talk about we are oneness with the universe, let's just say, or with each other. Everything is one. Even in a yoga class at the end of yoga, the yoga students might put their hands together in that prayer position and say namaste. Well, that word namaste means I am at that place in me. And when I am there in me and you are there in you, there's just one of us. So that oneness, that sense of wholeness with the self, with the universe, with the absolute, with the mystery, that's kind of the state that Yoga Nidra is taking us to. And so that's the subtle dimension of consciousness. It's deeply relaxing, deeply peaceful. And when you go there in the practice, there's a sense that everything really is A-okay. Everything is fine and everything will be fine. And I think that having a practice like that, especially now, is really important. Yeah.
Could our listeners, we go to YouTube or?
Sure.
where would people go to either learn more about Yoga Nidra or to find someone to practice with?
Sure, absolutely. So I teach Yoga Nidra, and I'm actually currently looking for opportunities to do that. So I am going to be finding probably yoga studio to do that, but my teacher is Richard Miller, and he's a psychologist. He has taken the sort of traditional Yoga Nidra and done kind of this very current spin on it, if you will. It's called iRest, little I, capital R-E-S-T. And he teaches that through the Department of Defense, actually. Walter Reed Medical Center uses iRest Yoga Nidra for their vets coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. It's also used for trauma healing. It's a very powerful practice. So your listeners could certainly look up iRest. There are a lot of other paths to Yoga Nidra. That's just one, but that's the one that I'm the most familiar with.
Okay.
There are a lot of books and YouTubes out there.
Okay. I mean, especially right now, it's not like we're going to walk down the street and find someone to do this with. So.
No, we're not. But YouTube is wonderful. There are lots of, there's a Yoga Nidra network that has a lot of free Yoga Nidras on their website. Like I say, the iRest website also has a lot of free resources on their website.
Okay, great.
We were talking about sleep too, and since sleep plays a big role in immunity, do you have other suggestions for improving sleep and how to get a really good sleep? I know it is something that women over 50 do struggle with sometimes.
Absolutely. So one of the big things is we already kind of touched on, getting off of the screens in the evening. And this is just so hard because anybody who likes stories and wants to watch their favorite show, like when do you really watch that? You watch it in the evening because most of us, well, until recently anyway, have been working all day and you're not going to, check out the latest episode of fill in the blank, at 2 p.m. So that's one thing. The other thing is not eating late. It takes your body several hours to actually digest all of your food, and your brain and your liver and all of your other organs need to be doing restorative sleep related work when you go to bed, not digesting a big meal. So in this way, something like intermittent fasting or time restricted eating is really helpful. But just not eating, if you want to get to bed at 10 o'clock, probably you should be eating no later than 6 o'clock. So that's a thing. And also alcohol is very disturbing to sleep. We kind of think that having a glass of wine is sort of relaxing, and it sort of is, but it also disturbs your sleep architecture, depriving you of deep sleep. Another thing is you don't want to be exercising too close to evening. So especially if it's a real, workout doozy, you want to kind of get that in earlier in the day. Something else that's kind of a real hot button for people is caffeine. We pretty much run on caffeine, a lot of people. And even if you have it first thing in the morning, it can affect your chronobiology. So that whole system of rhythm that your brain and body go into. And even if the caffeine is mostly gone out of your system by the time you go to bed, it can still disrupt your circadian rhythms. But some people are very sensitive to caffeine. And even if they have coffee or tea, at 7 a.m, it's still in their system by 10 o'clock at night. I don't know how many people over the years have stopped drinking that morning cup of coffee and found that their sleep improved hugely. So that's a big thing. And then another thing is, these mind-body practices, finding a way to wind down, to really get the thinking mind into a settled pattern that, it's nighttime now, it's time to let go of the day and all of the thinking that went along with the day. And then something else we could talk a little about is melatonin. We did already touch on it when we were talking about good sleep hygiene. But melatonin is also an antioxidant in addition to your sleep hormone. And so a lot of times as we get into our later decades, we don't produce as adequate melatonin production. So sometimes it's helpful to support that as well. I think those are probably pretty good basic sleep tips.
Thank you.
This is going to change the subject just a little bit, but I know you have experience with helping clients overcome food sensitivities. I wonder if you could just give us some insight on that.
Sure. So food sensitivities are really common, and a lot of times people don't actually know they have them until they remove the foods and then add them back. So in the natural medicine world, functional medicine, integrative medicine, we do a lot with doing an elimination diet, for instance, to try to actually both heal the gut and determine food sensitivities. So the big culprits are going to be things like dairy, gluten, soy, corn, peanuts, grains of all kinds for some people, tree nuts for some people. But the big ones are going to be gluten and dairy, and sugar is kind of a special circumstance, but gluten and dairy are pretty inflammatory for most people. And when they take those foods out of the diet, very often a lot of symptoms just go away. I mean, all kinds of symptoms. We tend to think of food sensitivities as causing GI symptoms, and of course they can and do, but they can also cause all sorts of other things like skin problems, joint pain, emotional instability, mood issues, headaches, all sorts of non-gut specific kinds of things. So eliminating those sort of big players very often just clears up a lot of misery. And if you do a full out elimination diet with, which means kind of getting rid of all of those things that I named, and then adding the things back in one at a time and just really keeping good account of what happens when you have that food. So maybe you put almond milk in your shake every day because you know that that's, better than cow's milk. But when you take out the almond milk and add it back in, you find that almonds was the thing for you. So it's,
here you are trying to be healthy, right?
Exactly. So it's very much an individual thing. So I highly recommend people doing an elimination diet, especially if you've never done it. It can be extremely eye-opening and provide a lot of intelligence that, you didn't have before on your system. So, yeah, because food sensitivities, the problem, one of the problems is that if you're eating foods that you're sensitive to, it can really cause a lot of gut trouble, specifically one of which is leaky gut. And leaky gut is when you have this enhanced intestinal permeability. So your intestinal tract has to be permeable to some degree just to let nutrients go across the border there and be absorbed by your bloodstream to, feed you the nutrition that you're just eating. But if you have enhanced intestinal permeability, then that means that all kinds of other molecules that are not supposed to be passing through are getting through. And that could be things like toxins, pharmaceuticals in the water supply, other kinds of parasites, and all sorts of things that are getting through that barrier. And then that can have systemic effects. And That's another thing that is really hard on your immune system, because when your body is busy fighting stuff that's in your general circulation, it's not maybe as available to fight a virus or a cancer cell or something else when you really need it to. So that's another way to protect the immune system, is actually, to be eating a really low inflammatory diet, low allergenicity diet, and not taking in foods that you are individually sensitive to.
Okay.
What's the difference between food sensitivities and a food allergy? I mean, an insensitivity and an allergy. How do we know when we have one or the other?
Versus the other. Yeah, so food sensitivities are mediated through the immune system, generally by what are called the IgG part of your immune system. And food allergies are mediated through the histamine system, which are generally IgE antibody related. Usually when people have food allergies, it's something like, and it may not be this extreme, but like a peanut allergy or a shellfish allergy. When you have the food, you generally have an immediate reaction to that. But a food sensitivity can have days of delay. So you might eat something on Monday, and on Wednesday or Thursday, you have a headache, or your skin is itchy, or your fingers feel stiff. And you would never think to associate that with the turkey sandwich that you had at lunch on Monday. So that's why the elimination diet is a really good way to kind of ferret out the food sensitivities. But food allergies, they can be tricky, and there are specific tests for both kinds of food-related issues.
Thank you.
Our Becoming Ellie community is made up of women over 50 who are focusing on being fit and strong. And I just wondered if you could tell us how you would define fit.
Yeah, so fit is, obviously not just fitness of the body. And I think that when we have challenges like we're having now, this whole global pandemic, it's really highlighting ways that we're being called upon to be fit. So that means having strong mental health, having strong community health. Being strong and fit means being able to meet the demands that the world and life gives us in an unexpected and sometimes pretty challenging way. So I think that being strong in the body, being mentally tough, having good mindset, having good practices that keep us able to be grounded and peaceful and have a center and have something that we count on that's much beyond ourself. That is that sense of meaning, value, and purpose that's larger than just our individual self. I think that those are all things that contribute to fitness in a sort of holistic way. And also, it's today we're doing this call. It's the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, I think, today.
It sure is.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that that's another whole dimension of being fit, is realizing that we're not separate from nature. We are nature. And, this earth that we live upon is a living, breathing organism that, we are part of. And so in as much as we are affected by and we affect all the systems that we're in relationship with, having a good, healthy ecosystem, both in our own body and mind and heart, and also in the world around us, is extremely important. So doing the things that we can do to actually come into a deeper relationship with the natural world, with our environment, with our home that we are so fortunate to have here, I think is another dimension of well-being and fitness, albeit one that's not probably thought of in that way too often.
Yeah.
No, but that's great. Thank you.
Yes. We really appreciate you being on the podcast today, and you've given us a lot to think about. I'm wondering, is there somewhere our listeners could follow you online?
Yeah, at this point, that's going to be my Facebook page, which is Victoria Shaw Coaching and Consulting. And also, I put together a little self-care tips for your immune system for your listeners. So I will give you a link to that so that they can download that.
Excellent. Great.
Oh, good. So the Facebook page is Victoria Shaw
Coaching and Consulting.
We'll put that link in the show notes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, this has been my pleasure. Really, I've really enjoyed talking to you both and connecting with your listeners, even though I don't know them yet. I hope to someday.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much to Dr. Victoria Shaw for these thought-provoking insights.
And thank you to the listeners of this podcast. If you'd like to visit our website or Facebook group, you'll find us at Becoming Ellie.
That is spelled ELLI. And if you'd like to comment on today's podcast, leave us a message on the website or call our voicemail at 330-970-6662.
See you next time. Bye.
Yes, bye-bye.